Okay, good afternoon. We are coming to the end, but you cannot miss the most interesting session of this morning. It's going to be shorter than the other ones in order to gain some time, because we presume that most of you would like to go for lunch on time. And we are going to deal with a key issue, the knowledge economy and artificial intelligence. If there is any seminar or congress that do not speak about artificial intelligence, it's not it's not a congress of interest. So we have three experts with us, and we're gonna have an interesting conversation. And before introducing them, I suggest how we're gonna work. We're gonna talk about, or we're gonna organize the discussion about three main blocks. The first one is a little bit the state of the question, knowledge economy, the impact of artificial intelligence, the challenges that impose into our societies, the experiences of both countries. The second one, I think that we have to talk about a word that has been mentioned at the end of the previous session, what is the oil of the 21st century, what is talent. Talent is a critical factor for development. And we also believe that the third question that we need to deal with, being an Indian and Spanish conference, is about inclusion and impact. Because I think in both countries we have the sensibility to work on these issues. So we have today with us three prominent speakers. So Madame Meghna Bals is the director of the ICIA Center, is a lawyer with deep experience in media and emerging technology. So Professor Pranjal Sharma, so member of the World Economic Forum Experts Network, is an economic analyst, also a writer, and has an interesting book about the fifth industrial revolution, published by HarperCollins. And also Jordi Arrufí, my friend Jordi, he is the Chief Corporate and Development in Mobile World Capital Foundation in Barcelona. So, let's go? Yeah. So, as I was mentioning, setting the stage, or the state of the question. So we are living in knowledge economy, acceleration, or characterized by acceleration. Traditional industries shift to knowledge-intensive sectors, and artificial intelligence has come to change everything, absolutely everything. In that sense, I would like to ask you to reflect upon how these knowledge-intensive sectors are affected by the emergence of artificial intelligence. How can we use in a smart way artificial intelligence? How can make a positive impact of it? And also, what are the risks for our traditional industries, for our economy, of the merging of artificial intelligence? I've been reading from the last days the impressive figures about India. So we are a small country, 48 million inhabitants in Spain, and India is having every year 1.5 million engineers. So it's impressive, and Jordi and myself, we were visiting India just to be focused on that. But it seems that even India has a deficit of engineering, of talent specialized in artificial intelligence, almost 500,000. If India has a deficit, has a problem, how come the rest of the world can we deal with it? But this first question, so how you see the impact of artificial intelligence and the revolution that is taking place in the traditional economic sectors or traditional industries? Please. Yes,
go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
So, I mean, when we think about, okay, let's first look at the impact on traditional knowledge industries, as you mentioned, right, which would be the service sector. Broadly, the consensus is that there is going to be wide-scale disruption of different services and jobs in those sectors. But at the same time, it creates a huge opportunity, one, for upskilling, for complementing existing skilling programs, for complementing existing educational initiatives, and building up the skills of people in those sectors. It creates an opportunity for enhancing efficiencies, etc., etc. But of course, there is going to be a disruption. The extent of disruption to the workforce and services, we don't know yet. But that is where the role that think tanks like us should play, and we are in fact doing a study to understand, at least longitudinally, and when I say longitudinally, in the next 2 years, to what extent is adoption taking place across different markets in India, to what extent is workforce being disrupted, what kind of roles are being rationalized, because once you understand those trends, it creates an opportunity for you, for the government, to see where skilling can be deployed or where funds can be deployed to ensure that there is no wide disruption. There is no disruption to such an extent that there are millions of people just out of work within a short span. Then we can think about traditional industries. So I think agriculture is a good example where, again, we did a study where we were surveying companies that are working on ag tech with AI in India. And then, of course, the same arguments where, there's a lot of scope for increasing efficiency, let's say in milk cattle. There's a really interesting application of using AI to reduce pesticide use, because what they do is they try to recognize the sound signature. They use AI to recognize the sound signature of different pests and then use electric signals to kill those pests, and that decreases the need for pesticides. But the converse there is that there is a dearth of data, let's say in that specific example, on sound signatures of pests. That's something that the government has to put together. Similarly, in any kind of traditional sector intervention when it comes to AI, ultimately the availability of data, and most of that data resides with the government, is not where it needs to be, though there are initiatives that are being worked on to develop that capacity. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to you on this issue. So, Mr. Sharma, are we really in a revolution or a re-evolution?
Well, I think we are in an era of confusion, which is that everybody talks about AI, but I work a lot with, I'm on boards and I work a lot with CXOs, marketing officers, financial officers, and everybody loves to talk about AI, but look at the actual penetration of AI in enterprise operations, you will see that it is still at a very nascent stage. And the challenge is that at the proof of concept stage, AI can bring a lot of efficiency, but there is still not enough a business case for it in terms of the return on investment. It's still a very gray area in terms of how do you calculate the value you derive by bringing some of these AI applications. So I think some companies are just moving ahead. Technology companies is one category, but I'm talking about the user companies in every other sector possibly. Now, the moment you go from proof of concept to scaling, everything, all hell breaks loose. Organizations don't know how to adapt. The processes are replicated using digital processes. Physical processes are replicated with digital processes, which doesn't always work. So the fundamental challenge is today that an enterprise, an organization, I would say even in government, has to reorient itself completely to be able to make the most of technology. But that's a very difficult process. It's like saying that you have to change your entire diet and your daily fitness regime to be able to enjoy a better quality of health. It takes a while. And if you're looking at organizations, and they're global organizations in India, in Spain, and global-minded organizations, I think there is a serious challenge in understanding what AI can do. We see some early impacts, and what is often talked about is job losses. But I'll pause on the fact that the big arc of change, or the frontier of change for developing the knowledge economy and AI, is changing the talent framework. Unless people are ready to know how to use the tools of technology, we will be in an era of confusion. And I think that's what we see happening today.
Thank you so much. Jordi, what about Spain? Is artificial intelligence a central tool for companies? How is this transition into this knowledge-based economy?
Yeah, to sum up to what they're saying, right? I believe that there is a gap between expectations and reality. It's true that any technology goes through this famous hype cycle of Gartner, and maybe now we are up in the hype, so big expectations, but companies are feeling somehow frustration because they had big expectations that they are not meeting their business goals yet. But I think this technology has to be more mature. Probably the next wave of AI has to do with AI agents talking to each other. We see some good, let's say, pilots here, and also more customization. I think AI is in the agenda for Spanish companies for sure, especially for streamlined operations, being more efficient, and this is good. Also, maybe to create new business models, I think this is the real transformation, because let's say the easiest thing is to add a layer of technology within your current operations, within your core business, but creating new business models out of AI, this is the real challenge, self-disrupting sometimes your core business, right? But I think the challenge that we share both, I guess, India and Spain, is that somehow we are being adopters of an AI that's being created by another ecosystem. Usually, nowadays, the US is leading AI. And this is the big challenge. How can we develop our own AI, right? I think otherwise we will be integrators. We'll have big integration companies like Tata Technologies, right, which is huge, with many engineers that will implement technology for Indian companies, but maybe not develop its own technology, which is the big challenge. How can we be sovereign in this domain?
Thank you very much, three of you. And before moving to the second block, I would like to ask you about this issue. We used to say that economy is not only facts and figures, it's about trust and emotions. And in today's world, mistrust is probably the word, transversal word everywhere. Can we trust artificial intelligence? Is this transparent enough? I think that one of the key issues that many companies and citizens and even institutions are asking is about transparency and trust. So what can we do in order to take advantage of the possibilities of artificial intelligence, but how we can reinforce trust?
So I'll just come to this very interesting point about trust and verify. Now everybody is using a Gen AI bot. It's on our mobile phones. Now it makes life so much easier. You want to have a thesis, you can have it in 3 seconds. But the time you save in using a Meta or a Grok or a Gemini to get work done quickly is compensated by you trying to verify whether it's correct or not, right? So in the end, you might end up using the same time to do that work because you get a great resume quickly, you get a great essay done quickly, but you don't know what the sources are. You don't know whether it's hallucinating or not. So we are in that process of and period of transition and shift where it's still not matured, but we have leapt onto it, we've jumped on it and say, this is the final answer to all our problems. So I think it's going to take a while for trust to develop. So I think it will be a while before humans and AI can have a good relationship. But please also remember that, just when we start to build a relationship of trust, some new breakthrough will come and we'll be back to square one.
Meghna, how do you see it?
I'd like to respond to Jordi's comment about developing sovereign capabilities. I think there's huge potential for India and Spain and the EU in general. I know it seems like we've missed the boat when it comes to LLMs and that infrastructure, but the thing is that in both our economies, there are situations where you need localized, extremely contextualized, narrow solutions. And there are entire ecosystems that can be developed around those. And that localized, specialized knowledge is not going to come from a Meta, it's not going to come from a Google. It's going to come from local companies. And in India, from state to state, there is a difference in how, like previous panelists said, there's a complete cultural difference. So there is a whole ecosystem that can be created from design to deployment, because design would be very different across different states in India. Deployment would be very different. And to your question of trust, for trust, we were speaking about health tech earlier, for trust in the technology from the deployer's perspective. So let's say a doctor wants to use something, you will need a constant training and understanding of those people that are using it, of those people who are deploying it. And within, again, the deployment context, if you're speaking about trust, there is a lot of scope for technological innovation, and India is already doing this to create a sort of RegTech ecosystem around this technology. That being said, I think that there is some utility in managing or maintaining a certain amount of uncertainty, because you don't want a situation where you've completely compliance-ized trust and safety. That creates an incentive for large companies particularly to fire their trust and safety teams and say that, okay, fine, we're not going to do anything. You figure out, government, what we have to do to make our products safe. And the thing is, you want them to think about innovating to make their products better, to make their products safer. So you have to keep a degree of uncertainty there. In the context of trust, again, I think that when we think about AI, and let's talk about misinformation, since that was kind of alluded to, we can't think of it as divorced from the wider kind of context of misinformation that is pervading our world. It is not only deepfakes that contribute to misinformation. In fact, empirically, it's been established that they contribute to a much lower percentage than other forms of misinformation do. But until you empirically kind of establish whether deepfakes are more convincing than existing information, and it has been established that they are not, or non-AI forms of misinformation, they are not, you cannot kind of distinguish between them. So you have to then consider, in terms of the specific problem of misinformation, what do you do? I think an inoculation system is probably the best way, where you go on the ground and you sensitize people about these technologies, about the nature of misinformation, about how the tools that they can use to be able to discern what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is false. I don't think regulation plays, I think regulation plays a role there, but it's also dangerous because it can be weaponized, because ultimately then you have government sitting as the arbiter of truth, and that can't happen. The right to the right to free speech, it does not include the right to truth. If it did, all fiction would be outlawed. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Meghna, very much. Jordi.
Yeah, well, interesting topic. We More Capital, we work to develop and boost ICT specialists. Probably ICT specialist is the first profession that develop a technology to replace themselves, because with AI, they could eventually code automatically, right? This is what's happening. And it's curious how the most renowned survey for ICT specialists is called a Stack Overflow survey, asked to what extent developers are using AI to code. And the answers is yes, 60–70% of the developers are using in their daily basis these kind of tools. But when they are asked, but do you trust those tools? Only 2.7, they say, I fully trust the tool, right? So this is the mismatch, right? And you need senior engineers, actually. Maybe you don't need that many juniors anymore, but you need seniors.
There is no efficiency improvement necessary.
We will see. I think we will maybe meet this goal in the years to come, not yet, right? But this is a mismatch, right? Between they are using, but they don't trust, so they have to double check. So you need senior engineers. To meet also this goal, I think there are some advances in transparency. The AI Act, famous AI Act from Europe, is boosting transparency. Otherwise, you don't have either a business model. So if the new interface to interact with internet is an LLM, like ChatGPT, for instance, you don't give credit to the sources. But what is the incentive to the source to create content if the user won't check the source anymore because it has a new interface? So I guess it's not only about transparency, it's also about business model. If you don't give credit to the source that nurtures the AI, the source doesn't have incentive to create the knowledge and the content to be nurtured, right?
Absolutely, it's a big issue. This is
yeah.
not the conversation. Let's move into talent. What is the critical, the killer application, as the Anglo-Saxon says. Jordi and myself, 3 years ago, we were traveling to Bangalore, trying to establish a talent bridge, and we fail. Jordi, we fail. And it's probably one of the main challenges we have, how India and Spain, we can work together in order to take advantage of each other. So how India has done over the last decades in order to become the factory of AI engineers or engineers, technology talent? What kind of lessons can we learn from you? And also, what can we do together to profit the capabilities of each of us?
So, Pao, I think we have to make a distinction between IT services sector, which has dominated the conversation about technology for the last few decades. Brilliant model which was conceived of in the 90s, and India became a great service provider. But we did not create technology. So that's one important thing that we have to understand. India didn't create technology, it created a brilliant model of IT support services. Today, we are trying to make that shift. But therefore, what you see is that the big 4 or 5 IT services companies now have 100 new unicorns coming up around them, because they're creating new models of services. I say that India is now doing what is called pin code level services and last mile delivery of services, products, government welfare schemes as well. Talent, when you look at, so that's one part of it. The technology companies are one part, but companies that use technology is separate. So I think when India and Spain look at collaboration, we have to make that distinction. I would say to you that Spain and India should look at what are the sectors that have to come together to collaborate. Technology is an enabler. You cannot say, I'm going to use AI and then figure out what I want to do with it. You don't get into a car and then decide where you want to go. First, you decide where you want to go, and then you decide what kind of vehicle you want to use. If you're going to the mountains, you'll use a certain car. If you're driving in the city, you'll use a certain car. The problem with many of the conversations is that we decide the technology first and then figure out what to do with it. So, I would say, for example, what are the new areas of great importance for India where we have suddenly opened up? Defense, for example. So there are 3 or 4 sectors in India which opened up for private sector and global players, which were closed for 75 years. Space, you have $150 million of investment coming up for space tech companies. Look at GIS-based services. Look at defense technologies. Look at the drone industry, which has come up out of nowhere. It's one of the strongest industries in the country. So here is where, you know, the leaders, business leaders on both sides have to pause and think and say, all right, this is the sector we want to collaborate on, and of course technology is going to be there. Let's identify the sector and say, do we have natural collaboration, and do we have the right kind of advantages with each other? Do we see competencies which complement each other? And then, perhaps not just for both countries, offer that solution and business to other parts of the world. So why don't we look at that? Let's start with the sector, let's start with the industry, let's look at the business solution, and then see how technology can help us reach that goal.
Thank you so much. Meghna, how do you see we can work together?
Engineering has really been, or science and technology has really been a core part of India's development agenda since the 50s, really. If you look at the 1958 science and technology policy, you know, technology is mentioned there as a key lever of social and economic progress. And there's been a concerted effort by successive administrations to kind of create this pool of engineering talent, because again, there's been this long-standing belief that technology is the ultimate dividend to development or for development. In that context, you know, and to Pranjal's point, we have a lot of engineering talent, but as you mentioned, we still fall short on AI. One of the reasons is because your marks very often develop what kind of specialization you get into, which I think is a huge problem with the way, you know, the Indian kind of education system is structured. That being said, we do have this core kind of demographic dividend. So how do we now work with Spain or work with the European Union to, you know, merge strengths? I think a huge strength both in Spain and the EU is the creation of IP, which is something that India falls short on, where not that great on R&D, and I know that even there's a kind of deficit in terms of R&D spending in Spain relative to the rest of the EU, but relative to India, it is slightly higher. So I think that ability to be able to bridge the gap between our ability to create R&D, but our wealth of engineering talent, whereas over here there is not as much of a demographic dividend, but there is an ability to generate IP. I think merging those kind of complementary strengths would be one possible way forward. And to his point, I think there is a lot of opportunity in narrow fields, in small language models, and to do it cost effectively, because the US companies waste a lot of money. And we don't know, I wouldn't say waste, but they spend a lot of money. And we don't know what that, to Jordi's point, what that investment is ultimately going to yield, because it's still in, towards the peak of the hype cycle. And I think that India's strength has always been to do things related to technology very cost effectively. So I think that if there's a cost effective, possibly sustainable solution, or solutions that can come out of some kind of joint development with high IP creation as well, I think that's something that is a very strong value proposition.
Thank you. Jordi, from your side, from an European and Spanish side, what could be these sectors that we could reinforce, or we can try to establish this talent bridge that we tried to do a few years ago?
I think it's a very good approach, right, to focus on what you are good at, right? Because here we have the temptation to be the Silicon Valley of Europe in everything, right? And you cannot be the best in everything. But it is clear, especially, I would say, Spain, it's, I would say, outstanding in some industries. I would say life science is very clear, life science, healthcare, because we cover the entire value chain from research. On the one hand, we have genomic institutions that are very high-end technology, but also pharma companies, local pharma companies, but also international pharma companies developing technology from Spain, and also good institutions of healthcare and hospitals and primary care. Right? So this one I think is very clear. The second, maybe I would say gaming, to name another one. But I would focus in some of those ones. Sometimes the challenge is to have hybrid talent. So talent that is good at IT, but also has some skills on a given knowledge on an industry, because you have to apply it in a given industry. I agree with what you said, right? That when this quotation, when you have a hammer, everything is a nail. So many business leaders start looking for problems for a solution that is a technology, right?
Exactly.
So I remember Metaverse. So everybody here at MWC 2 years ago or 3 years ago were exhibiting their solution in Metaverse. They didn't have a problem to solve, but they had the headset, right? So fully agree with you. But I want to highlight, when we visit Bangalore, we were so amused about the quality of technical institutions. We went to visit this famous ITTI, right? The Indian Technology Training Centers with high-end talent. I think it's something that we are missing here. We have good institutions, for instance, best business schools in Europe are here in Spain, or some of the best ones. But in engineering, we have good ones. We have Autónoma in Madrid, we have Politécnica in Catalonia, but we are not that excellent as they are pushing, right? And the other thing, I think, my feeling was, in India, they started being the software factory of the world, as China was the factory of manufacturing, right, goods and services of the world. And nowadays they're building in China better cars maybe than in Europe itself. And we were amused about the number of unicorns, as you mentioned, right? You have many unicorns, more than only Bangalore has more unicorns than Spain, right? And this is because probably this international investment, foreign investment, has ended up with local companies. Maybe the source of the talent has started in these foreign investment companies, and now they're building their own ventures. I think in that sense, India will become the new China of IT, right? Because you started maybe as a foreign investment business, but now you're creating your own business.
Let me add to that. I would not want to use the word IT anymore, because IT is actually dead, if you ask me. You know, IT as a service, as an offering, because everything can be automated. So IT does not exist. It's an industry of the past, not the future. But what India has evolved, and you caught on very well, Jordi, is that now we have a new business segment called global captive centers. Now, some of the largest companies of the world have invested billions of dollars in having people working in India and serving those companies' services globally. And that talent, which was only IT, has now moved up the value chain to offer knowledge-based services. Whereas it's not just, can I fix my computer because the power button is not switching on, to something more valuable. For example, analyzing shipping data. Now, for large shipping companies, and Spain is a great maritime industry. For shipping industry, there are GCCs in India who will analyze the data of shipping routes. They will analyze data of various other things. That goes into enterprise intelligence. That is the new sector, for example, where Spain and India can look at. Can we do something together on that? But like I said, Meghna mentioned some sectors, from existing sectors where private sector was already dominant to new sectors where private sector was not allowed. There is a great potential of Spanish and Indian companies to collaborate, not just for each other, and I'll repeat, not just for each other, I think for the rest of the world.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time, but I would not like to miss the third block, what is about on this issue. And when we are thinking an AI-driven knowledge economy, under your point of view, how we can assure that we make it inclusive, that we benefit not only big companies and unicorns, large companies, but also small and medium enterprises, especially small enterprises, and how we empower and protect underrepresented sectors of society, like could be women, unemployed, disabled people. I think that when we are talking about AI knowledge economy, we should focus, we should have in the center these vulnerable groups. So what is the Indian experience in that sense, and what can we do together?
So I think the greatest achievement of India in the last few years is the digital public infrastructure. And numbers which were quoted earlier during the day in various sessions are important. For example, 500 million people now have a digital bank account. IMF and World Bank assess that if we had gone through the traditional route of setting up bank branches across the country, it would have taken us 40 years to do it. We did it in 5 years. So it's also an example of digitalization where you don't use existing models, you create completely new models to reach out. So I would say all kinds of inclusion that you think of is now being enabled by digital public infrastructures, whether it's health, education, finance. Also ensuring that government services and welfare offerings go directly into the pockets of the people who deserve the most. So a lot of the corruption which we had for previous years has reduced significantly. I mean, I always say that India is not a poor country, it was a poorly managed country. So I think we're trying to address that situation, and some of the public infrastructure is enabling it. But please,
Yes.
over to you.
So, okay, let's tackle the inclusion question first. I think on the plinth of inclusion, I think we need to think about it. I mean, we think about it first from the standpoint of linguistic inclusion, right? The interesting thing there is that when you have linguistic inclusion, like when you deal with Indic languages or models trained on Indic languages, they raise their own problems, let's say, of bias. It's interesting because our language is completely gendered, as is Spanish, I think. Everything is female or male, which creates its own issues of bias, which is also interesting, which is something that we need to prepare for. So when we think about inclusion, let's say linguistic inclusion, we have to also think about what the kind of negative externalities are of dealing, emphasizing that and then deal with them. I think the problem arises where we kind of look at one issue like inclusion with blinders, and we don't kind of consider what the fallout could be. Not the fallout, but the problems could be, and think about solving about that. If you could just repeat your first question, sorry.
How we can assure that we...
so smaller companies, yes. I think it starts with rules, because I think very often when we create rules or when we think about, unfortunately, like our impression of this ecosystem is very tied in with big tech, and they aren't, yes, they make a big part of one element of the consumer-facing tech in AI, but they aren't everything. And the problem is that a lot of rules are made with them in mind. And when you make rules with big companies in mind, you threaten to kind of wipe out smaller companies, because a small company will never be able to comply the way a big company can. A big company can comply with everything and still operate. A smaller company will be wiped out by it. So I think it starts with the rationalization of rules. And when we think about how to rationalize rules in that context, I think we need to think about specific targeted rules for different use cases that start with the harms and not so much principles down, where again it's like left to interpretation and you need a lot of resources to interpret that principle accurately, which again kind of plays into the hands of big companies. So I think when we think about particularly regulation, because it is so coterminous with this ecosystem, I think we need to think about what is the capability of a small company, let's say a bootstrap startup of 10 people, to be able to comply with this law. Is my law or is my regulation, or the regulation that I have in mind, going to wipe them out? In which case, what is a more kind of agile framework for governance? So standards is one example, but again, standards are kind of problematic because one, there are certain countries that dominate the standards pool, then mostly it's large companies that feed into the standards making process. So I think that we need to think really carefully about how we decide rulemaking, because most digital businesses, and particularly in the context, particularly AI and tech as well, it's an on-off switch. If you can't meet the cost of compliance, you are going to get wiped out. So I think.
So can I just add a point on this? Sorry, Jody, I'll just take a minute. Two parts to this. One, large software companies do not cater to small companies. They do not have a model for taking care of the enterprise needs of small and medium companies, which is a big problem globally as well as in India. On small businesses, one of the things through the digital public infrastructure is India is trying to break some of these global monopolies and duopolies. So for example, the MasterCard Visa duopoly has seen competition from India's UPI system. If we depended only on Visa and MasterCard, none of the 500 million people would have had a digital cashless payment system. So that's secondly, for example, now our e-commerce space is dominated by Amazon and Walmart. The government is now creating an online digital commerce initiative which ensures that everybody can participate. The smallest of companies can participate, and they are not blocked by either Walmart or by Amazon for their own rules and regulations. So there are attempts, I would say it's work in progress, to ensure inclusion of the smallest business unit in the country.
Thank you so much. Yeah, sure.
Sorry, just 1 second. I disagree with that, because we've done research where we found that, and this is, I guess, the other point, where it's not so zero-sum between big and small when they're dealing with each other. So for instance, targeted ads on large digital platforms are a huge boon for small businesses in India. They enable them to target customers and compete with the likes of industrial incumbents within the country, who they otherwise would not be able to match when it comes to promotion, distribution budgets. They also enable them not only to do business and acquire customers in India, but globally as well. And this is all empirical research that we've done. So that's another thing where I think that there needs to be some thinking around how can we leverage the billions that these companies, these large companies are investing in their own ecosystems. How can we leverage their investments in a way that small companies can benefit and ensure again that regulation doesn't come in the way of those? Because for instance, if I'm in AWS providing free credits for cloud compute, it may be seen as anti-competitive. But do I want to foreclose access to free compute to small companies? I think that's something that also needs to be considered, not to see the difference between big and small as a zero-sum game.
Thank you, Meghna. Jordi, you have, in Mobile World Capital, you have worked a lot on digital inclusion, but I think in Spain, this debate on digital public infrastructures has not been a big debate. How do you see that also? But explain us a little bit how your vision on digital inclusion and...
Yeah, well, regarding digital inclusion, especially maybe regarding gender gap, as she was mentioning, right? In Spain, more or less 30%, between 25 and 30% of IT specialists are women, right? So there is a gap here. And of course, that generates bias. And the way to solve it, I mean, there are many ways, but one of the ways to solve it is to create like role models, right? To inspire women, inspire kids, and so on, right? For instance, out of your curiosity, I'm sure everybody knows, but the chess world champion is from India, right? He's a very young guy, 18 years old. They say chess was born in India, right? I'm sure that will be a boost for new chess amateur players in India, right? So same should happen with IT. We need these role models of women leading AI projects, right? And that will inspire new generations on the one hand, right? And regarding this, the challenge here is that if you have a technology that is developed with a gender bias, probably won't match the base of users, because if 50% of the users are women and only 15% or 10% are developing, there is a gap, right, in this sense, right? And you were actually asking also about
the digital public infrastructure.
Yeah, well, I think there is an opportunity here, right? Because all the big players has already coped and locked in big customers, right? So the big corporations are already using AWS, Microsoft, Azure, and Google, right? But there is this challenge of the sovereignty of technology in Europe, in India, and so on. And this is the new challenge. And the good news is that we still have room for customers, because the SMEs are not that digitized, and might be a new segment for the development of these solutions. Because in the big ones, we will have to struggle because they're already locked in with these suppliers. I've heard, I was talking to one of the heads of the DG Connect strategy in Europe, and they say now we are going to publish the Cloud Act. We have an AI Act, it's more about regulation, but the Cloud Act is about having cloud infrastructure and public cloud technologies here from Europe, more open, more transparent, and for European customers, and probably SMEs will be the first customer segment, so I think somehow it's good news.
Actually, you know, India and Spain could collaborate. The entire cloud infrastructure of the world is dependent on 2 or 3 companies. And if they shut down, you know what happened with the AWS?
Yeah.
Or if they decide to weaponize it, which also happened in India, that Microsoft one day just decided to shut services to a company because they were told to. We need to look at opportunities and options where perhaps Spain and Indian companies can create alternate cloud platforms to compete globally.
Yeah, there are opportunities, for instance, and again, we're researching this, to use neoclouds, that's one, and edge computing as well. And given that we have, you know, over 1 billion handsets, edge computing would be a really interesting compute opportunity. Yeah.
We have been very efficient in time management, so I think we have time to, Vega, Berta, do we have time for one round from the public, if it's okay? Yes. 5 minutes, yeah? We have been so disciplined that we have to open the floor. Okay. I propose to make 3 or 4 questions if it's
He
okay.
has a hand. Please raise your hand, I think.
Raise your hand and introduce yourself, and then the panel will close. Don't be shy. Last opportunity this morning to take the floor.
As long as you don't throw things at us, it's okay.
That's all.
Yeah, thank you. That was a fabulous session. You know, recently I'm a filmmaker and I represent ESCAC, the film school here, as their head of South Asian initiatives. And recently I read this thing where Shyam Shankar, who's the CTO of Palantir, a company that understands and literally weaponizes AI, his largest private investment was in a very old-fashioned technology, which is a movie studio. And suddenly, what you were talking today, movies in terms of storytelling, you can call it propaganda, but basically changing public opinion is probably one of the most powerful things that exists. The other thing is movies is enforceable IP. That exact thing that is a gray area with AI is who's creating the IP. And I think for both Spain and India, this thing of storytelling which is localized and specific, because AI is all about the destination, not about the journey. We are all about the journey. And with the largest, probably the largest language groups in the world, which is Spanish and, all Indian languages. So for me, this thing that a CTO of Indian origin of a company is taking his personal wealth and putting it into enforceable IP and storytelling is something that kind of in there's probably a clue for what, especially this dual year coming up, with culture, technology, with Spain. Yeah, so there's a question in there somewhere. But it was just...
It's lots to think about. Maybe we can take more questions.
I was intrigued. I was just intrigued by this thing that happened.
Thank you so much. We're going to take 2 or 3 questions before the panel will close. Yes, here on the left, Bettina, here, gentleman.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the insightful discussion. Pranjal, my question is for you. You mentioned GCCs as one of the industry that's developing, and all the MBBs and Big Fours are talking about GCCs in India. Do you see regulations? The first part is, do you see regulations as being a hindrance towards expanding GCCs in India further, especially with regards to EU regulations on the back of data? And second, there was a point that India is having about 500,000 less AI engineers compared to what it should have. Would that also be having an impact on spreading GCCs across the country?
So quickly, I think...
we're going to take one or two more, and then we close down. We're running out of time. Anyone else wants to? Yes, here. The young lady here on the first row.
Sorry, I'm so small, I can't see anything. Sorry. Oh, sorry. It's okay. It's okay. No.
Well, thank you so much. That was so insightful. So I have a question probably for all of you here, but talking about the GCCs, but also Global Capability Center or Global Center of Excellence, it's not something very new. I mean, it has been, Rolls-Royce have done it, General Electrics have done it in 2000 or something. Here, the problem I want to address, coming from a corporate side, is that there's a huge cultural issue here where Spain is not open to doing it, although they'll see benefit to it. I mean, it's not like completely not open, but there's a resistance to not speaking the same language, the whole concept of outsourcing things to India, although they see the benefit, they agree to it on a PowerPoint, but then they will not take the step ahead. So compared to this, they'd rather, they would rather invest in getting 500 engineers, if needed, to Spain to work in their offices, putting in 40%, losing 40% of the margin, as opposed to opening up a center of excellence in India. This is something that it's probably a work that the think tanks or government should come and do it, but it's a huge tug of war we're having with the Spanish companies. They want to go and they don't want to go at the same time. So the talent bridge that you want to build in is something that has to see what is the right model. How do we encourage the companies to not just always think of nearshore, but also think of offshore and use India's talent pool in India, not making them come to Spain.
Thank you. Anyone else?
We're actually running a bit.
Okay, so
we're not running very well on time.
So I think, Jordi.
Yeah, maybe I can take this one.
Can we be a bit more open?
Of course. I mean, we are open as India in order to receive foreign investment. Only in Barcelona we measure the number of tech hubs. It's true that this is not new. So this kind of excellence centers always happen, but nowadays those excellence centers are more focused on technology, on IT, not only as a supporting, let's say, lever on this famous Porter value chain, but as a core technology developed from Barcelona, 35,000 people, and those hubs from international investment also have hubs in, for instance, Bangalore, Pune, and so on, right? Which is true is that we don't have that many huge companies that have needs to settle IT departments both in Spain and Europe and so on. If I talk locally, in one of the challenges that we have here in Barcelona is that we don't have large corporations. First of all, you need large corporations to have this kind of needs, right? Maybe in Madrid there are more because IBEX 35 is mostly in Madrid and maybe they have a few more. But it's true also that there is a frontier or a barrier because of culture, right? And that's something we should work all together, because I know that all big corporations have good experiences externalizing part of their, not externalizing, I would say, sometimes it's even internal, right? But dislocalizing in India, right? And they have good experiences, and what I see is that it's not anymore, neither India or Spain, it's not anymore, let's say, low-cost talent. They go there because they have high-end talent, regardless, I wouldn't say regardless the price, but the price is not the main issue anymore. It's about finding high-end talent.
Thank you, Jordi. Meghna?
I mean, to your question, there's also the digital nomad visa, which is available over here, which allows you to work remotely. If, you know, like bringing people over is a cost. The problem with that visa is that it's not, I mean, you can travel around in the Schengen area with it, but there are time limits on, you can only do it for 90 days at a time within a 180-day period. So that may create problems, for instance, if you're like a contract worker who's working with multiple companies, you know, and not just one. But there is, you know, there is a mechanism. There are some other like immigration mobility issues, but I think India and the EU are working towards resolving those, because immigration is a huge issue for us, or like the mobility of human capital is a huge issue for us. So from that, I wanted to respond to the data protection question, because it's an issue that we are working on specifically. The problem with India's data protection law is that it omits two very key exemptions to processing data without consent. One is contractual necessity, which allows you to deal with any third-party data to fulfill a contract, which is where your GCCs would be implicated. Another is legitimate interest, which is basically, or legitimate use, which is to basically use the data in any legal way. That is probably going to create problems. And then the third issue would be cross-border data flows. So we have a negative list that we've created. We have a data-free flows with trust system, basically, where we create a negative list and we say that, you know, these countries, these 3-4 countries, whatever we identify, you can't send data there. But now those have been further complicated in the rules, although the final structure of the rules is not out yet, the digital personal data protection rules. But I think that the issue of legitimate interest and contractual necessity is going to create problems for GCCs. It's going to definitely create problems for call centers, though some may argue that those are going to be automated anyway, so why care? But on a more serious note, yeah, that's going to create an issue.
Thank you, Pranjal.
She gave a much better answer that I could have given, so I'm thankful for that. I'll answer the other part of it. See, engineering, I mean, to say AI engineer, I think it's a difficult combination today. Engineering itself is changing, right? Core engineering is changing. There's blended engineering. All kinds of engineering are coming in, coming together. What I see is that the shortfall of AI professionals, I think we have to look at AI professionals. I see that AI will become part of nearly every domain and every profession. You know, there are reports of young students in grade 4 and 5 being told how to understand and use AI. But don't forget that the younger generation is now growing up with a Gen AI bot on their device. So you don't need to teach them. I think the way they will grow up, the way we grew up, for example, I think we are the transition generation. We use a rotary dial phone, but we also have, you know, we also do internet calls. So I think that in every country, including Spain and India, the younger generation who are coming up to be professionals, joining the workforce, will be so digital native that I think all of us here cannot even imagine how skilled they will be to navigate it. Sometimes when we think, we worry about them, but they are not worrying about themselves, because for them, that's the normal. So thank you for the question.
Okay, so Jordi, Meghna, Pranjal, thank you very much for your wonderful contributions. Let me remind you that this afternoon, as we are in the Smart City Expo, we're going to have a very interesting session on India's urban superpower. So you cannot miss it this afternoon. So enjoy lunch, and thank you very much for your contributions and attendance. Thank you so much.
Thank you for wonderful moderation.
Yeah, thank you.
We have food waiting for you outside. Please help yourselves. And the public session. Oh, yeah, sorry. Just let me finish and I'll get out of the way. And then we have a public session that we were talking about at 4:15 at the main stage. So we hope that we'll see you there. Thank you very much.